Good day everyone. This is the video presentation about lesson 4.1, which is the biodiversity and healthy society. I am Zuhari Indal, together Jeremy T. Gyaman. And now I am the first reporters of this topic. For the overview of this topic, biodiversity is a term represent the total of all life on earth, and that's a big thing to sum up. Thousands of different world habitat, millions of different species, billions of different individuals, and trillions of different characteristics they all have. The total biodiversity of our planet is immense, which is a good thing because the more biodiversity, the more secure all life on earth, including ourselves. For the learning outcomes, at the end of this lesson, the student can determine the interrelatedness of society, environment, and health. Second, identify everyday tasks and evaluate whether they contribute to the wellness and health of biodiversity and society or not. And the third one is create diagram that would show the relatedness of species in forming up a diverse and healthy society without compromising another. So when you hear the word biodiversity, what comes first to your mind? So that's what we are going to discuss today. So when we say biodiversity, bio means life, diversity means variety. Biodiversity is defined as the vast variety of life forms in the entire earth. Another definition of biodiversity is the variability among living organisms from all sources, including the terrestrial, marine, and other aquatic ecosystem, and the ecological complex of which they are part. These include diversity within species, between species, and of ecosystem. It means all living things are part of biodiversity, including the animals, plants, fungi, and microorganisms. Also, the ecosystem is the coverage of biodiversity, such as forest, mountain, river, and the ocean, including the man-made, which is yung mga sakahan, bukirin, at iba pa. The ecosystem is consists of living things and the non-living things, which is the ocean, land, sun, and the climate. And these have a relationship to each other. Ibig sabihin, ang pagkawala o pagkasira ng isa ay maaaring magdulot ng pagkawala o pagkasira ng isa or higit pa. That's why the ecosystem can be defined as the variety of different habitats, communities, and ecological processes. So, when we talk about the relationship of biodiversity and ecosystem, the ecosystem support life forms, and the biodiversity makes ecosystem sustainable. So that's how ecosystem and biodiversity interact with each other. That's why the biodiversity and ecosystem have a huge contribution to our lives. So people should know more about the importance of our diverse environment and how human activities can either contribute to its growth and destruction. Sometimes kasi we do a lot of activities that can result of destruction of our environment, no? Nagkakaroon ng pollution, loss habitat of animals, etc., and global climate change. So the main purpose of this topic is to awaken our mind that we need to care our environment or our ecosystem. No, just think about the needs to drink clean and fresh water, the needs to eat healthy vegetable and food, and the need of man to transport, which makes him rely on fuel. So all of these are human needs that are answered and provided by ecosystem. Thus, if you fail to keep the process of taking care of the ecosystem, it is us who are actually putting our lives at risk. And significant decline in biodiversity has direct human impact when social needs of human beings. That's why we need to give a full of love or attention to care our biodiversity and ecosystem. And now let's proceed to the changes in biodiversity. When we say changes in biodiversity, it is the alteration and losses. The alteration of climate and losses of animals, trees, cause of deforestation. Alteration in any system could bring varied effect. A change in biodiversity could have erratic effects not only in wildlife or marine life but also in human beings. For example, human inhabiting the forest would disturb the natural order of life. The trees and the plants would be affected in the land clearing operation where the house would build, and the animals, insects, and all types of life forms in the cleared area would be either be displaced or most likely be killed. That's why the loss of these life forms could affect the entire ecosystem governing that environment. From this, we can clearly infer that when our ecosystem is not well taken care of, the biodiversity encounter change that may impact human health on such different levels. It means we need to take good care of biodiversity and ecosystem. So let's proceed to the threats to biodiversity. The first one is habitat loss and destruction. Major contributing factor is that inhabitation of human beings and use of land for economic gains, including the cutting trees that can be cause of loss of habitat and destruction. And this habitat destruction is vastly increases in area of vulnerability to natural disaster like flood, soil erosion, drought, or even the crop failure, and etc. The second one is alteration in ecosystem composition. Alteration and sudden change either within species group or within the environment could begin to change entire ecosystem. Alteration in ecosystem are a critical factor contributing to species and habitat loss. The third one is exploitation, over hunting, overfishing, or ginagamitan pa ng mga chemical para magkuha ng mabilis yung mga isda, and over collecting of species can quickly lead to the decline, change consumption patterns of human is often cited as the key reason for this unsustainable exploitation of natural resources. The fourth one is pollution and contamination. Biological system respond slowly to change in their surrounding environment. So this pollution and contamination, it can cause of irreversible damage to species and varieties. And the last one is global climate change. Both climate variability and climate change cause of biodiversity loss. The main factor cause of climate change is deforestation and increased livestock farming, etc. So these are major threats to biodiversity that were identified by the United Nations. So this is the end of my topic. So pakinggan muli natin ang next reporter na si Jeremy T. Jamal.
Before I will continue the lesson, what is the importance of biodiversity? Yes, biodiversity maintains a balance of the ecosystem. Biodiversity is incredibly valuable. It both increases the total extent and productivity of an ecosystem and its adaptability to changing conditions. These use are values primarily for the ecosystem itself, but they also benefit for the humans. Example, plants, it can produce food and oxygen, and trees can be used for wood or for pulp to make paper products. Biodiversity also has additional human benefit of increasing the potentials for use. It protects water resources and also forms and protects soil. Another one, biodiversity provides biological resources. Biodiversity provides us with drinking water, oxygen to make breathe, food, medicine, decomposition of waste, and help our earth or planet withstand natural disaster. The role of biodiversity. Biodiversity plays a role in food. Human use of 40,000 species for food, clothing, and shelter. Second, human health. 80% of the world's medicines comes from the nature. Industry. Biological resources provide many industrial materials such as fiber, oil, rubber, timber, and paper. Now, consequences of biodiversity loss. Number 1, destruction of habitat. That the destruction of habitats can be destroyed by people for settlement, agriculture, mining, construction, or etc. This forces species to adapt to the changes, or move species can also fall into starvation and sooner or later die. Number 2, hunting. The wild animals are hunted for the commercial use of their hides, skin, tusk, fur, and meat. And number 3, exploitation of selected species. Exploitation of important plants in the medicine industry has resulted in their disappearance from many of their natural habitats. Many of these plants are ruthlessly collected for teaching and laboratory work. Number 4, habitat fragmentation. Habitat fragmentation is when large habitats are divided into smaller ones. This separates species that depend on each other. Number 5, collection for research. If species are collected for research, there could be a disturbance in the ecosystem. Number 6, introduction of exotic species. Species that are not a natural habitat of the environment that are intentionally or accidentally introduced are known as exotic species. This forces native species to compete for food and space. Number 7, pollution. Example, water pollution can damage estuary and coastal ecosystem. Toxic waste entering water can disturb the food chain. Coral reefs are being threatened by pollution from industrialization, oil transport, and offshore mining along the coastal areas. Number 8, control of pests and predators. Predators and pests control measures kills predators and pests, but they also intentionally kill non-target species. Number 9, natural disaster. For example, floods, droughts, forest fires, earthquake, volcanic eruption, and etc. have a big impact on plants and animals' life. Volcanic eruption can completely destroy plants and animal life in its surrounding areas. The basic concept about biodiversity loss was from Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace. And now, the nutrition impact of biodiversity. According to the World Health Organization, biodiversity is a vital element of human beings' nutrition because of its influence to food production. Biodiversity plays a crucial role in human nutrition through its influence on world food production as it ensures the sustainable productivity of soil and provides the genetic resources for all crops, livestock, and marine species harvested for food. Another, nutrition and biodiversity, this relationship takes two main forms. One is the maintenance of ecological services. When we say ecological services, are the many functions that the environment provides us without cost. These ecological services includes water cycling and filtration, the degradation and decomposition of waste, and air purification among others. The contribution of biodiversity to nutrients in the genetic reservoir. When we say genetic reservoir, this is the infections, disease, ecological, and epidemiology and natural reservoir, also known as disease reservoir or reservoir of infection. Most of our crop plants are the result of centuries of breeding-related plants and animals with different advantageous characteristics. And now, health, biology, and biodiversity. Almost all living organisms are dependent to their environment to live and reproduce. Basic needs of living organisms such as air, water, food, and habitat are provided by each environment. Oo, lahat ng mga tao, hayop, in short, all living organisms ay umaasa lamang sa ating kapaligiran upang mabuhay. Bakit ko nasabi na umaasa tayo sa ating kapaligiran? Dahil dito natin nakukuha ang pang-araw-araw nating pangangailangan para mabuhay. Ang halimbawa nito, hangin, tubig, pagkain at tirahan. The evolution of human beings was due to the improved access to these basic needs. Advance in agriculture, sanitation, water treatment, and hygiene have had a far greater impact on human health than medical technology. Although the environment sustains human life, it can also cause diseases. Another, lack of basic necessities is a significant cause of human mortality. Environmental hazards increase the risk of cancer, heart disease, asthma, and many other illnesses. Na kung saan The hazard increases the risk of cancer, heart disease, asthma, can be physical such as pollution, toxic chemicals, and food contaminants, or they can be social such as dangerous work, poor housing conditions, urban sprawl, and poverty. When we say urban sprawl, it is the uncontrolled expansion of urban areas. Unsafe drinking water and poor sanitation and hygiene are responsible for a variety of infectious disease. In 2015, approximately 350,000 children under the age of 5 died from diarrhea, disease related to unsafe drinking water. Approximately 1.8 billion people use drinking water contaminated with waste. More than 2 billion people lack access to basic sanitation. The interrelation between human health and biological diversity is considerable and complex. With the current biodiversity loss at unprecedented rates, the delicate balance between human health and biological diversity is at risk. Thus, environment-related illnesses. Some human illnesses that are found to be related with its environment include Parkinson's disease, heart disease, cancer, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, asthma, diabetes, obesity, occupational injuries, dysentery, arthritis, malaria, and depression. Sometimes human disease is connected to work or what place they belong to. Because of this, they get many types of disease like I mentioned earlier. Parkinson's disease, heart disease, cancer, and etc. According to experts, climate change could also have a serious impact on human health and could deteriorate farming system and reduce nutrients in some foods. Due to climate change, many people are affected, not only us but also the vegetables and fruits. When we lose the nutrients we get. Relationship between human health and environment raise many ethical, social, and legal dilemmas by forcing people to choose among competing values. Many of these issues at the interaction of health and environment have to do with meaningful or with managing benefits and risk. For example, pesticides play an important role in increasing crop yields, but they can also pose hazard to human health and the environment. Alternatives to pesticides use food significantly reduce agricultural to the activity leading to full price, which would is point in preservation in some parts of the world. When drafting and implementing environmental health regulations, it is important to consider vulnerable subpopulations. When we say vulnerable subpopulations, is a group with an increased susceptibility to the adverse effects on an environmental risk factors due to their age, genetics, health states, or some other conditions. Vulnerables and population includes children, pregnant women, elders, whose sensitive bodies. And that's all in this topic.